So I became acquainted with the grief process in May of 2000. I had been married 2.5 years to my husband Jack, and he was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And it came as a complete shock to us. We then together walked through cancer and all that goes along with that for 14 months, and we had a lot of faith. We prayed that God would heal him, and ultimately God did take him to heaven in July of 2001. Grief for me was a lot of, very deep sorrow. It was a time of sorting through a lot of disappointment with God, and really just coming to terms with the magnitude of the loss that I had just encountered, and so many emotions for me during the grief process that were confusing, and working through all the coming to terms with death, and God's role and how all of that came together. Ultimately I had to come to terms with the fact that I could hold on to my denial and my anger and my depression, or I could submit or surrender to that this was somehow, inexplicably, it was God's will, and that's ultimately how I ended up getting through the grief process. So the way I dealt with the loss was I really leaned into my faith. I would spend every single day, I would meet with the Lord, morning, evening, usually for long stretches, and I would journal, I would wrestle with him. I wrestled a lot through all the hard questions that you have about why did this happen? Why did God let this happen? Is God really a good God who would let something like this happen? I had this vision that my future was going to be better than what I was experiencing with the grief. And so I persisted through it. It was definitely one of the hardest times of my life to get through grief, but I do have the conviction that of heaven, and that Jesus died on the cross so that he conquered death, and that we would ultimately we'll be in heaven someday, that I would be in heaven, that Jack's in heaven, and that God sent his son Jesus to die on the cross to conquer death for us, and that he knew what I was going through, and that really kept me going. For me, I had an amazing support of family and friends who really were the hands and feet of Jesus to me. When I needed to hear a word from the Lord, I had such great friends with wisdom who were able to speak God's comfort into my life. And it made just such a huge difference being part of a church community, and being part of having a great Christian support system who really loved me and held me, sat with me, was with me in the grief. Sometimes didn't say anything, but just hung out and went to the movies together. And so it was great to have that love, and I really can't imagine doing grief without the support of the church and friends and family to be Jesus to us. One of the keys for me to get through the other side of grief was really that hope was an anchor. And I was obviously going through a major storm in life. We all have different storms we go through, and I really needed to hold on through all the winds and the rains and I was really shaken. I had a firm foundation, but I was definitely shaken, and that hope as an anchor really kept me on track, because the enemy we all have, and there's an enemy, and he doesn't go away when we're going through grief. In fact, I feel like he may double down a little bit and really try to get us off course. And it is holding on to the Word of God during that time was essential to me getting through it. And I believe with all my heart that God is a God of hope. And what he has done in my life, I did remarry, and I now have Gary and Britton and Bryn. And I know that he can be a God of hope for every one of us here.